because he'd been let into the higher levels of the New World Order and rejected it. But my point is that in the secular world, Christmas is bigger than just Christianity. But because it has its roots in Christianity and the birth of baby Jesus 2,000 plus years ago in Israel today, the system wants to censor it and shut it down. Because if they can do that, they can get away with anything. If they can feed us superbug, bacteria-infected chicken and have the federal government certify it, that's the Reuters headline, then they can get away with anything. If they can give us flu via the flu shots and put sodium fluoride to brain damages in the water, the sky's the limit. Why, they can pass Obamacare, written to double and triple and quadruple your rates, written to cut the quality of care, written to set up death panels, all on record. And they denied it, knowing their idiot constituents, like lambs to the slaughter, would not go research the information, knowing that they would instead simply go along with it until it was too late. And then even after they found that it was a screw job, they would just submit to it, and the system, the war machine, the deindustrialization machine, the consolidation machine would simply roll forward. Well, the good news is humanity is awakening, and you're listening to an original worldwide transmission on the 24th day of December, 2013. And I'll be popping in throughout the transmission with original recording that I made on Friday, the 20th day of December, 2013. So even though this fresh original recording for you, the great people that would tune in on Christmas Eve, is not live, what is live? Most of my broadcasts are live, but soon it'll be 2014, then 2015, then 2027, and then 2058, and then 2198, and then 2274, and then 2023, and then on until it's the year 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, if humanity survives and moves forward. Because time really is relative, isn't it? We're all basically in the past, the present, and the future. We're all part of creation, all part of reality. And it's important to remember the universe and the individual mind is bigger than all the bureaucrats and all the sandcastles they build that will crumble into the sea eventually, to quote the great Jimi Hendrix, the great poet Jimi Hendrix. And off in the distance, the wildcats were approaching. And they heard the wildcats howl because the riders were approaching, to paraphrase and butcher Jimi Hendrix. Because it is teleprompter, talking point free radio TV, ladies and gentlemen. All right, when we come back, we are going to have an original premiere here of InfoWars review of It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart, with our own David Knight. So that is coming up. And then, oh, I forgot it. Will you guys bring me my print off of the text of, it was the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a genetically engineered mouse. So that is coming up as well. And then we've got some big interviews the last month or so that we're going to be re-airing as well. Want to commend the great crew for coming in to get all this done as well. And, of course, you, the listeners, spending time with us on Christmas. Merry Christmas to all of you. Why is that going on? It's because the tyrants fear liberty. And if they can pull down the icons of our culture, they can replace it with anything. And any conquered people have their religion destroyed and overwritten by the usurpers. And so we are here speaking out against this today. Again, it is the night before Christmas, and I'm going to give you my rendition of the night before Christmas, literally unscripted. I'm just going to read it and then make my little comments on it as we go. But first, we have a review by the great David Knight of InfoWars Nightly News of It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart. And so he's going to parallel this Christmas time special about the banksters, the gangsters, a.k.a. the 100-year anniversary of the Federal Reserve that just passed yesterday and their occupational rule over us. And then we're going to come back and I will give you my night before Christmas right off the top. I mean, this is going to be original. You know I do it. And so that's coming up as well. Thank you for joining us on this. Maybe that's actually the answer to comment on it. 'Twas the night before Christmas. Ooh, that's kind of old English sounding. That's racist. 'Twas the night before Christmas when all through the house. Ooh, a house isn't good. You can't have single-parent dwellings under Agenda 21. No, you can't do that at all. So it was the night before Xmas or governmentist worshipuses when all through the 200-square-foot coffin facility where they raise the taxes so high up you can't even afford anything bigger in the mega compact city as I was dying from cancer from the New World Order soft killing me. I'm sorry. 'Twas the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care in hopes that St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, you don't say St. Nicholas. See, they've erased that. You can't have religion anywhere, even personally. It's bigoted. So I'm going to say, in the hopes that the guy that Coca-Cola advertises and sells their chemical weapon Diet Coke would appear. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of Prozac and Ritalin danced in their brain-damaged heads. And Mama in her kerchief and I in my cap. Mother and father hurts people that don't come from regular families, so you can't say that. When Mama in her kerchief and Mama in her cap had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap. You don't need naps now with all the speed drugs they've got. So as we settled our brains for a nice convulsion, electroshock therapy, and black helicopters, and chemtrails, trendy, there you go. This is more modern now. I've only gotten through 3 paragraphs. There's like 15 more. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow. We got even record snow. Al Gore says the North Pole melted, and it's true. So there can't be snow if everything melted. Even if I see snow and record cold, it doesn't exist because Al Gore said it didn't exist. There you go. The moon on the breast of the new fallen melted snow gave the luster of midday to objects below. You know, that of a full moon shining off snow. Oh, my God, so beautiful. But you can't have beautiful literary things in Ingsoc, so this is banned under 1984. When what to my wondering eye should appear? Well, you shouldn't be looking outside. You should be watching television. But a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. Oh, that's animals in bondage. That should be banned. All animals that have been domesticated should be banned under PETA. This is racist. When a little old driver, well, you can't call somebody old. That makes old people feel bad. When a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. There goes that thing about being a saint again. This is outrageous. The Catholic Church should pay for abortions in all their churches. Oh, my racism, or whatever you call it. More rapid than eagles, his coursers they came. And as he whistled and shouted, and they called them by name. Oh, my goodness. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer, now Vixen. That's sexist to call it a vixen. On Comet, on Cupid. That's religious, too. On Donner and Blitzen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall. Now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly. When they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky. So up to the housetop, the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas, too. Oh, my gosh. They've got their own house. They like St. Nicholas. What do you want to bet? They're white and they're racist. And then in a twinkling, I heard on the roof. That's against, by the way, zoning to have reindeer on a roof. I want to call the police immediately. You know, neighbors nowadays would call the police. The prancing and pawing of each little hoof. And as I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney, St. Nicholas came with a bound. How much time do I have left in this segment? 15 seconds, folks. We're going out to break, and I'll have to cover the rest of this tomorrow because we got a special guest coming on about the rise of the robots. It's Forbidden Christmas. It's bad news. And we apologize for this blasphemy against the New World Order's God, Baphomet, the old serpent, the devil, and his baby crumpet.
The original Thanksgiving. Remember the Pilgrims when they came to this country? They thought they were going to Virginia. They thought they were going to kind of a warm climate. I don't know how prepared they were to be farmers. They were really coming from an urban environment, but they certainly weren't expecting the harsh winter that they got when they landed in Massachusetts. That kind of unexpected circumstances is something that could hit your family, could hit you. You never know when the infrastructure is going to be taken down. We have a very fragile infrastructure. It's highly interconnected, very complicated. And the more interconnected and complicated that infrastructure is, the easier it is for something to malfunction at some point. You can find yourself on your own. But beyond that, just for your family's health, just for your independence, you might even enjoy growing your own food. And there's no better way to do that than with heirloom seeds. You want to start out with good seeds. You don't want to start out with some kind of GMO thing from Monsanto if you're going to take the time to learn, and now's the time to do it, when there's not a crisis, to learn how to grow your own food. Save yourself money by growing healthier food yourself. You can get seeds from the InfoWars Seed Center. That's at InfoWarsStore.com. The InfoWars Seed Center has the widest selection of non-GMO, non-hybrid heirloom seeds available. We've partnered with the finest heirloom seed companies like My Patriot Supply, Emergency Seed Bank, Heirloom Organics, and others. So check it out. We've got a wide variety of seeds there at InfoWarsStore.com. That's what helps to fund our organization, is the products that we sell. We pick products that we believe in, that we think are going to help the quality and the longevity of your life. So look that up at InfoWarsStore.com, the InfoWars Seed Center. Now, we're joined right now with Dr. Noel Sharkey. We were concerned that we might not be able to get him. He is traveling the globe trying to wake people up to the dangers and the abuses of robotics technology. He's actually a professor of artificial intelligence and robotics, and he has now, after he had kind of an epiphany, we're going to let him tell you about it. I won't try to describe it. His core research interest is now in the ethical applications of robotics and artificial intelligence. Dr. Sharkey, can you hear me?
I can hear you very clearly, David. Hello.
Great, great. So you found Wi-Fi in that monastery?
Yes, I did.
That's great. That's great. Tell us a little bit about your epiphany. When you went from, you were working in robotics, you were very much interested in the technology of it, but like so many of us who work in engineering or technology, you didn't realize exactly some of the dark ways it was being used.
No, I didn't. I had my head in a bag kind of thing, just getting on with my research. Mm-hmm. And I was at a press conference in London about a government report on talking about robots, worrying about housing benefits for robots of the future. It was kind of a nutty report, and it was the first report our government had put out about robotics. And at the press conference, some journalist said to me, well, can you tell us a little bit about military robots? And of course, I knew nothing about it, apart from a little bit about bomb disposal, because I'm from Northern Ireland and we know about bomb disposal there. Right. So I thought I'd go off for the evening and just have a quick look at the internet, an hour or so I could answer questions. 7 months later, I finished that little look at the internet, having read, through all the US plans from 2001 right up to the present at the time, which was 5 years, 6 years of plans for all the US forces, the roadmaps, and they were all talking about the application of autonomous robots and for killing people. And I just thought, this is ridiculous, the way they were talking about it. It was like science fiction. They didn't seem to have an idea about the limitations. And so I wrote an article for the Guardian newspaper in the UK then, 2007, and it started there, and it's been a whirlwind since.
I find it very alarming because I look at every week we see some kind of new robotic technology. They're spinning it in the media as saying that these are the Pentagon's rescue robots. I don't think that DARPA is really funding rescue operations. I don't think the Pentagon's really funding that. If anybody thinks that after looking at the way they're using drones to assassinate people all over the world, they need to have their head examined. That's some of the most obvious propaganda I've ever seen. The media should be ashamed of itself for putting out these killer robots, these robotic projects that are being put out by the Defense Advanced Research Projects, DARPA. DARPA has a research budget that is higher than they've got for the entire budget of North Korea. We're supposed to be concerned about North Korea, yet North Korea's entire economy is about the same size as the DARPA research budget. And DARPA is constantly, this seems to be their primary focus.
Well, DARPA aren't accountable, so their thing, and it's a good research agenda, their agenda is you just keep funding everything that's even slightly crazy. And as long as one of them comes up and comes up trumps, then you're okay. But I was laughing there because one of the reports I read from DARPA about these humanoid robots that are going to carry wrenches, and they talk about them going ahead of the forces. Well, why would you have a pile of humanoid robots going ahead of the forces with wrenches? Are they going to undo people's water pipes?
Fix the broken tanks. Yeah, here's the headline. This 6-foot, 330-pound robot may one day save your life. That's talking about the Atlas robot. And the troubling thing is that when the Atlas robot came out, I looked at it, I thought it was very frightening, the way that this thing is able to move around. And the fact that it has these two long arms that essentially look like cylinders, where I could imagine them being guns of some sort. And Ray Kurzweil comes out and says, that's great. Now all he needs is a brain so he can act autonomously.
Oh, God, yeah, that's bad, yeah. I think you're right, though. I can see it. The cylinders are going to become machine guns. I would say it's no doubt about that at all. Maybe not for a while, but that would be the general plan, I would think.
Yes.
I mean, why would DARPA be spending money on rescuing people? When have they been in the business of rescue ever?
Yeah, and then we have these articles that are coming out. Now, this is about a year ago. This is from Wired's Danger Room. It says the Pentagon doesn't trust its own robots. They say that there's a cloud of distrust and misunderstanding hovering over robots that the Pentagon already has. So they're looking at this, and they're evaluating this, and they don't really like it. So we've got to conduct a media campaign to change the public's mind, to change the military's mind. You're pushing back in the opposite direction. And we understand that the military-industrial complex wants this very badly. They see this as a brand-new profit center. I'm very, very concerned about the lack of accountability that is going to happen with these killer robots. Can you address that?
Yes, I mean, you're right about the profit. I mean, just in terms of the drones, which we know about already. I mean, Israel made $4.8 billion in the last 5 years profit on those. And the competition is so stiff. So the idea is that you've got all the drones. How do you compete in that big market? And the way you compete is let's add autonomy to it. Let's make them work on their own. And then we can make a lot more money. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to preemptively ban them. That means ban them before they get out and before there's too much investment, because once billions of dollars have been spent on it, it's going to be very difficult. Very difficult. And we're making very good headway at the UN, actually.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that you're going around and you're addressing the press, you're addressing governments, you're pointing out to them where this could head. I see this, you know, when we're talking about nuclear war, if some government presses the button and launches a bunch of nuclear weapons on someone, there's going to be literally hell to pay for that. There's going to be accountability for that. But if they take a bunch of killer robots, as we've already seen with drones, we've seen how they can go in with drones, they can destroy a village, and there's no accountability. Nobody is held responsible for that. And it'll even be easier for them once these robots have self-autonomy. They can basically say that they've got plausible deniability. They can say, well, the software went wrong on it, or it was a hardware bug. It wasn't me. It wasn't the president. It wasn't the general. It wasn't the lieutenant. It was just this crazy technology, so we'll fix it. Meanwhile, they've killed a lot of people, and I can see them using this domestically as well as abroad. So if you think that this is something, historically governments have killed more of their own people than they've killed in other countries. It's called democide. So if you think this is something that is simply going to be used against these people on the other side of the world that you don't like, you need to wake up about that as well.
I think really do. And the thing is that what the United States and the high-tech nations like the UK, they have a problem understanding that this stuff will proliferate and everyone will have it. And then where are we going to be? And that's my biggest worry, is this idea that we'll keep ahead of the technology, we'll be the ones who'll use it, without thinking at all that everybody else is going to have it and they will all interact together, and then it's going to be a real mess.
We've already seen countries like Iran setting up their own drones. They're not that technologically advanced. It didn't take them that long to get drones. It's not going to take them long to get robots. This is something, and what we're concerned about here, I have to say, Dr. Sharkey, we have a little bit different situation in the U.S. is unique in the sense that now we have this massive program of bringing home weapons that have been used in Iraq and putting them in police departments here in America. And we're already concerned about the fact that humans themselves are not being held accountable for their actions when they fire on a child with a toy gun. What's going to happen when a robot does that? Do you think there's going to be any accountability for that?
Do you really think the United States police will start? I mean, they certainly talk about arming robots with tasers. That would be a start for it. But tasers are kind of deadly. I mean, 150 people died in the US within a period of 2 years from taser abuse. So if you start arming robots with tasers, then I think it's only a short step to arming them with weapons, really, with lethal weapons.
And they're very horrible, quote-unquote, non-lethal weapons, very horrible ones. It's not just tasers. They have all kinds of things that they can beam at you to make you sick, to blind you, that sort of thing. We just had, you talked about how they kill people. We've got a teenager right here just south of Austin that was tasered by a cop in a school who was standing around a fight and didn't get out of the way in time. The cop tasered him, fell down and cracked his head. He's now in a coma. They believe he may die. That happens all the time with tasers. So when you talk about non-lethal force, you talk about shooting people with rubber bullets, you talk about using these gases on people. That's not something that we're looking forward to seeing happen in terms of crowd control. That can be very, very oppressive.
Yes, but you don't have to worry too much because we're going to stop it.
Good, good. So tell us about your campaign. Tell us, you're going around and you're talking to different governments. I guess you're having public speeches where you're trying to inform the public. How is your press coverage?
Well, press coverage has been very good, but we had a breakthrough recently at the United Nations. There's a committee of the United Nations called the CCW, and that's the place where poisonous gases got banned, biological weapons got banned, chemical weapons. So that's the place for prohibiting new weapons. And we spoke to the French have just taken up the presidency, and we spoke to the French ambassador, then we spoke to the US delegation, and they've agreed with us that they would put this forward as a mandate for discussion in the UN. And last Friday 2 weeks ago, they had 117 nations from the CCW met, and one of those nations could veto it. Russia were there, China were there. There was a massive discussion, and they accepted the mandate. So next year, the CCW committee are setting up an expert workshop to take this on board and discuss it.
Well, that's great. And your campaign is StopKillerRobots.org. They can learn about that on the internet. www.stopkillerrobots.org. It's a campaign to stop killer robots. Now, you've taken this to the UN, you've taken it to other countries. I'm a little bit more skeptical of the UN and these other countries. Hopefully they will ban this, and hopefully these other countries won't secretly develop this on their own, worried that they're going to have some kind of a robot gap or something like that, like they've had weapons defensively do it because they're afraid the other guy might do it. My big concern, and I think your campaign will be very effective at this as well, and that is to address the engineers and the scientists, to try to get them to understand, because that, I believe, is where we really need to go. As long as there's an engineer or a scientist who will develop this kind of stuff for pay, who doesn't look at the ethics of their work, you're going to find some kind of a politician or a dictator somewhere who will do it, who will use those people, who will pay them large amounts of money, and who will break any treaty that comes up, won't you?
Well, the problem is it's mainly the US, because they're a bit more cautious in Europe. In the US, it's very difficult to not get funded by the military.
Yes.
Most of the robotics labs are run by the military, are funded by the military, and people aren't necessarily making weapons and things, but when you're funded by the military, it stops you speaking up.
Yes, yes.
It stops you speaking up against it. I mean, there's hope. I mean, there's a professional magazine in the US called The Engineer, and they ran a poll of the readership asking how many people would go for a complete ban, or how many people would just go for trying to make the weapons more perfect over time. Only 3% of the readership said they would make the weapons go more perfect over time, and 73% said there should be a total ban. So we're beginning to see a consciousness of it.
That's very hopeful, because so many times we'll talk to, directly, Alex will talk to soldiers and policemen over the radio and say, understand that the kind of society that you allow to happen, if you allow and are part of this kind of abuse that we see happening in the streets, that's going to be the society that you live. That could be your family that is brought under that. And historically, we've seen that always does happen. It can't be contained and only limited to people who don't work for the government. We need to have that kind of awareness with engineers. And as you pointed out, it's very difficult in America to get a job if you're an engineer that doesn't involve the military-industrial complex. I know when I got out, it took me a while to find a job where I wasn't working for the military. That was my degree initially. So I understand that, and it's good that people will privately say that. And I think I really applaud you for what you're doing, because getting the information out there, people don't even believe that this could happen in so many cases. They don't believe that the technology is there. They think it's just the science fiction fantasy of the Terminator. And we've been criticized for that here, that we're talking about some wild thing. Talk about the absolute, talk about how the technology is approaching rapidly.
Well, we've had 44 nations at the UN now speak up with concern, so people better believe you now. It's not science fiction anymore when you have major countries like the US, Germany, Pakistan even, all speaking up against killer robots or about them. So it's definitely on course to happen. There's no question of that unless we stop it. But you have to be very worried in the US as well about your privacy. I mean, you've got the NSA there really doing a lot of nasty things, surveying people. But you're starting to get a lot of drones, and once the drones become autonomous, not even armed, they can be everywhere. They're getting very small. And what worries me is not the current government you have, but these are legacy systems. So what does the next government do with them? What does the next government do with them? Because they just inherit them directly. And if you ever wanted to create an authoritarian regime, you're going to have the right tools to do it. And that is a great concern to me as well. Military stuff.
You hit the nail on the head. What we are building in the United States right now is a perfect infrastructure for tyranny. And whether our current leadership uses it, or it's the next or second administration down, that's what we're concerned about. We're going to continue this discussion with Dr. Sharkey, and we're going to talk to him about what the current state of the art is. Dr. Sharkey, what I would like for you to talk about in this segment is the state of the art in robotics. People don't understand how imminent this problem is, how rapidly it's coming upon us. Could you address that?
Yes, certainly. Well, we've got lots of armed robots on the ground and in the air, as you know, that are remote controlled. But what's happening now is a very rapid development of platforms that will carry the weapons. The more we talk in the campaign about banning these weapon systems, the more we're driving them underground, it seems. There's less talk about it now. But for instance, in the United States, you've got 3 devices I'd like to mention to you. One is called the X-47B, and that can land on there. It's a fighter jet, a unmanned combat aircraft, fast subsonic, just beneath the speed of sound. It can land on an aircraft carrier. It can take off from an aircraft carrier, and it's going to be used in the Pacific. It's got 10 times the range of one of your F-35 fighter jets, so that's really productive for them. And it's just been tested 2 weeks ago in very windy conditions, and that's working very well. That will be weaponized and used. So it's like a super drone, but you don't need people involved at all in controlling it.
Wow.
You've also got a prototype system called the Crusher, and that's developed by Carnegie Mellon and DARPA again, of course.
Of course they are.
The Crusher's a 7.5-ton truck. And you can see it if anybody wants to go on YouTube and just do Crusher CMU, they will find it, and they'll see it crushing Cadillacs, and it's got a big gun up there on top of it. Now, the other device that you're making in the United States is on the HTV-2 program, again, DARPA, and they've got an aircraft called the Falcon, and the idea is to be able to get an unmanned combat aircraft anywhere on the planet within a 1-hour window. So this thing has been tested at 13,000 miles an hour. So that's just the United States. In the UK, we have the Tyrannus, which is actually supersonic, so that's even faster. That's an intercontinental unmanned combat aircraft, fully autonomous, means that there's no human controlling it, and that's been tested in Australia just in the last couple of months. So these are progressing very quickly. The Chinese have the invisible sword, that's the Anjin, and that's being designed and built for air-to-air combat. Again, no human controlling it. The Russians have the Scat. The Israelis are using one called the Guardian. And at the beginning, when they developed it, they talked a lot about it being fully autonomous to do routes and to fire on people at the borders between Palestine and Israel. But now I spoke to an Israeli colleague the other day who was very excited because I had an early picture of it with guns on it, and now they can't find any pictures of them with guns. So I'm afraid we're driving these people underground a bit, but they're still doing it.
Well, we can understand very quickly the implications of something like the Crusher that's going to crush vehicles domestically. But even when it comes to these supersonic jet transports that are taking off from aircraft carriers that are unmanned aerial vehicles that are remotely controlled, that has a lot of danger in the sense that that's going to make our already aggressive government starting wars everywhere for very little justification and without congressional authorization. That's going to make them even more likely to get involved in these wars. And there's this thing called blowback. Once you start a war somewhere else, it will come home to you one way or the other eventually. It may be asymmetric warfare. It may be terrorism with people coming to your country and blowing people up in shopping malls, which will then be used to send out the Crusher robots. But thank you so much, Professor Sharkey, for joining us. We're out of time. Good luck on your campaign. Keep trying to educate people about these dangers. It's a very important thing you're doing.
Thank you for having me on, spreading the word for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's StopKillerRobots.org. We're going to be right back after the break with Leanne McAdoo, so stay tuned.
Greg's up next, and then Danny and a few... No, Danny's not up next. It's William, and then I'm totally confused now. No, it's Greg. I'm seeing who's been holding the longest, and then it'll be Joe. But Max Keiser, anything else you'd like to add, important points that you've forgotten to get out there to folks?
Well, you mentioned earlier the group of people. I just want to reiterate this point. Mark Faber and others that are talking about 2014 being a watershed year to the turning point in market chaos. And I just want to reiterate that I'm putting my flag in the ground and saying that Bitcoin is the phenomenon happening this year. And next year we'll look back on 2013 and realize that Bitcoin was the black swan. Bitcoin was the disruptive event that totally transformed the global economy. And we won't be able to make that statement until this time next year, looking back and say that's truly what happened. But I just want to make sure I go on record as saying that I believe that all those people are correct. I believe they're missing the true elephant in the room, and that is Bitcoin.
They're missing the Bitcoin factor?
I believe they are, because they sense that there is this epic change coming. I've talked about it on your show many times, as many have, but I think that the emergence of cryptography, as it has changed the surveillance industry, changed the global alliances, is bleeding into currencies, and that's a huge event. It's the biggest event in currencies in hundreds of years.
Well, when you've got 85 to 1, 100 to 1, 200 to 1 profit to loss ratios, or you've got stock ratios where the company's making no money, but it's valued 100 times its supposed profits, we're in deep trouble. Here's that Dave Stockman clip that we talked about from Bloomberg. And the thing is, now what we talk about is even invading dinosaur media. Here it is.
All right. If ever I had a guy, you're my budget guy, tell me your impressions after combing through some of the numbers of what has been put forth by both parties yet to be voted on.
Well, first, let's be clear. It's a joke and a betrayal. It's the final surrender of the House Republican leadership to Beltway politics and to kicking the can and ignoring this budget monster that's hurtling down the road. They're busting the caps, and it's totally unnecessary. It's going to add $70 billion to spending this year and next year, and then they're going to pretend to save it in 22 and 23.
All right, that's a CNBC clip where he's saying something similar. Let me actually read what he said here. He said on Bloomberg, it's in our article, market valuation has lost every anchor to the real world. You want to say that this kind of speculative froth that you get at the top of a cycle where valuation loses any anchor in the real world, loses any anchor in the real world. That video's up on Infowars.com. This is what we're talking about here. So they can't criticize Bitcoin claiming it's not connected to anything when what they're pushing is connected to a bunch of debt that we know has negative value and was based in fraud, Max Keiser.
Well, they're basing their analysis or their value structure is tied to fiat money. And fiat money, by definition, has no intrinsic value at all. The dollars in your pocket are worthless, except for the paper that they're not printed on, as Gerald Celente likes to say. The Bitcoin, however, by comparison, is as you'd have to make the comparison to gold or silver. It has real, genuine intrinsic value, and then it has value on top of that as a means of exchange and as a store of value. But he's absolutely correct stock market and the bond market in particular, that's the key, is trading at 300-year highs in the UK and trading at 240-year highs in the United States.
We're out of time, Max. Will it completely go 1929, or what will the ongoing implosion look like? Slow molasses or lightning?
Buy Bitcoin. That's my answer.
Basically, any subject. That's why I like watching his shows online or listening to them, because it's thought-provoking, and I know a lot of history, so I can tell when somebody's got a wide-ranging knowledge. Not that anybody knows that much. There's so much info in the world. The more you learn, the more you know how much you don't know. And then it's frightening to see the content public and establishment believing they know so much and see knowledge as a threat to their delusions. But Stefan Molyneux is the founder of Freedom Domain Radio, the largest, most popular philosophical show in the world, with more than 2,400 podcasts, Free Domain Radio, with 2,400 podcasts, 10 books, and 50 million downloads. Stefan has spread the cause of liberty and philosophy to listeners throughout the world. Prior to launching Free Domain Radio, Stefan built a thriving career as a software entrepreneur and executive. In 2006, he left his work in the tech industry to devote his efforts to his radio show. Now a self-identified full-time parent and philosopher, Stefan speaks regularly at liberty-themed events all over North and South America. Stefan is the author of 2 novels, Revolutions and The God of Atheist, as well as 8 nonfiction books on relationships, government, and religion. And he's with us for the rest of the hour. I got a bunch of news I want to cover with him randomly, stuff that's broken today, to get his take on different topics, different angles of things. And as someone, I guess, who identifies as an atheist, I'm not mad at him or upset at him because he's a libertarian-minded person and believes in human liberty, and I agree with so much of what he has to say. So many times I see atheists and they're statists. In fact, I would say on average, most, at least the atheists I know and run into, they're big-time statists. And they think the state is God. They've really created just another God. And my whole argument is, even if you don't believe in spiritual realms, or the eye can only see a tiny fraction of what's actually going on out there, we know there's a lot of mysteries in the universe. Even if you don't believe in God, I like the Bill of Rights and Constitution because it has a higher power, and people are on top, then the state's under us. Well, the state always wants to get up there where God is above us. I don't want to get into an atheist debate here with Stefan. I just wanted to throw out that people say, well, you had a Jew on your show, or you had an atheist, or you had a Catholic, you had a Protestant. I'm not getting into all this infighting about what group somebody's in or what group they identify. I identify with wanting to have a planet that survives, a good future, and my children having a good future, and I'm a fan of humanity. And in Devil's Advocate, they have the devil character played by Al Pacino say, I'm a fan of man. Well, the archetypal devil in a Jungian way wants to kill, steal, and destroy, and is not a fan of man, God's creation, made in God's image as a little creator. So the devil doesn't want you to succeed, isn't a fan of man. It is a predatory system, not a virtuous economic model, as Max Kaiser was talking about, but a vicious economic model where you enslave people to control them. And so Stefan joins us. There's so much to get into. I want to get into a new Vigil ad for one of these stimulant drugs they're pushing because it's so hilarious, the video that goes along with it, and get his take at the bottom of the hour on that and take calls. I want to get into Obamacare, the open collapse of the establishment with al-Qaeda publicly working for the U.S. government and NATO now. What does that do to their narrative? I want to get into where he thinks the world's going with China, because we know when governments get in trouble, they start big wars. Well, you can't do that anymore. They have nuclear weapons. So there's so much to talk about. But, Stefan, out of the gates, what do you want to talk about first, or you want to respond to anything I just said?
Well, I agree with you about, I call them stateists, or rather I want people to be stateists, which is to not believe in the state. There's this horrible thing that happens in history, as I'm sure you're aware. It's sort of like you have a balloon and you push one side of the balloon in and the other side bulges out. If you look at the atheistic political philosophies like communism, they may carve out a deity from the hierarchy of human thought, and then like a giant vacuum vacuum, state power rushes in to replace that. So I think that it's actually more dangerous, much more dangerous, to replace religion with the state, which seems to be the default position of most people who have secular concerns. They tend to be socialists. There's that traditional alignment of the left with agnosticism or atheism. You may believe in religion, I may not believe in religion, but neither of us get to use the state to impose our will on the other. But when you get people who believe in the state, it becomes this massive sword of Damocles that you use to flatten the aspirations and potential of everyone else around you. So I completely agree. Live and let live as far as personal belief goes. But when people cross the border into wanting to wield political power, which comes more from the left than from the right, then we have great grounds for significant disagreement.
Well, as a guy that studies trends in history, where are we right now? I mean, my gut tells me, but Ron Paul was on yesterday, he concurred, we're at the crossroads right now. Do you concur with that? And what do we do during this flux point where more change happens in a decade than happens in the next 100 years? What do we do?
I agree with Ron Paul. I agree with you. It is now or never. I think this point in human history is the fulcrum. It is now or never. You ever played this game when you were a kid? You have a sort of slide, a teeter-totter, and you sort of walk up one end and then it tips, you go down the other. I think we're at that tipping point. As far as what we do, well, most people have no ethical standards whatsoever. That doesn't mean that they're evil or they're out there strangling hobos or anything. It just means that they go with whatever is most comfortable. Right, so if the media says, hey, Nelson Mandela is a hero, then everyone flies out and takes their self-pictures smiling away at the funeral, and they call him a hero. They'll just say whatever people tell them to. You need the government for protection. Our foreign policy is noble. We're going to bring democracy to Iraq. Whatever people hear that is convincing, that's what they will believe. They just do what is most comfortable. I think the goal, and this is all the way back to Socrates, the goal of thinkers is to make it more uncomfortable to be a conformist than to be an independent thinker. Right now, it's pretty comfortable to be a conformist, to believe that the government is going to help you and the war on terror is justified and, we were defending freedoms all around the world. That's comfortable. Nobody's going to really get upset with you about that. I think that we really need to work to make it less comfortable to be a conformist, to hit people with information and perspectives that are going to throw them out of the matrix, push their face into the static of propaganda that they've been bathed in since virtually the day they were born. We have to keep pushing people off balance and making them uncomfortable so that then when they're going with the flow, it's actually it's uncomfortable for them rather than comfortable, and that is really based upon the willingness to just be annoying to people and to consistently remind them that truth, reason, virtue, and evidence is how we make decisions, not the political momentum of a dead history.
Very well said. Just some breaking news right now. Just about 5 minutes ago before we went live, or about 6-7 minutes ago during the break, there's a Wichita, Kansas bomb scare with the police and TSA and everyone up there saying they caught someone who was in a bomb plot. Turns out over 100 times the last few years, and the New York Times even reports, the FBI has found mentally ill people who aren't even connected to real terror cells. The real terror cells work for the CIA and others and are actually attacking sovereign countries and trying to overthrow them right now. But I was even joking during the break and talking to the guys, probably something they're grandstanding or staged or, wound up one of their patsies. And sure enough, they're now saying the FBI wound up, it'll be the same MO, some 80 IQ, mentally ill person, I'm predicting. Wichita, Kansas, the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force arrested the man as he used his airport access card. So I guess he worked there. He says the man was attempting to deliver what he believed to be a vehicle loaded with explosive, which he would detonate and take his own life in the process. And you can bet money they approached him to lead the plot. And so many times, folks, I've said this, if they ask you to be part of a drill, if you work at an airport, they will set you up, too, to make it, again, I don't mean to digress, Stefan, but I mean, what do you think about honeybees kill more people, you can look it up, than terrorists every year, most of the terrorism staged, and then all the obvious pageantry and grandstanding that I need to have armored vehicles and checkpoints and be surveilled illegally, or bin Laden's going to shove a hand grenade, up my rear end. I mean, what do we do about this?
Well, like all things, Alex, we try to make decisions based upon facts, and we steadfastly resist the lemming horde plunge off the cliff of terrified propaganda. What are the basic facts about terrorism? The basic facts about terrorism are twofold. The first is that you are 7 times more likely to be killed by a cop than you are by a terrorist. Even if we include the obvious gruesome outlier of 9/11, you are 7 times more likely to be killed by a cop than you are by a terrorist. So if we look at the numbers, we would say that arming cops to fight terrorists is going to put the civilian population in far more danger. That's the first thing to understand. Of course, the second thing to understand is that terrorists are created by terrorism. Terrorism is a virus that breeds like any disease or virus in a petri dish.
And by the way, they admit that. The 12-year war on terror has tripled the terrorism. The Pentagon even admits.
Yep. Yeah, and they kill 35 innocent civilians to kill one person that they identify as a terrorist. And how do they find out if he's a terrorist? Well, some guy they're torturing or some guy they're going to throw in prison for 20 years under the threat of torture and imprisonment. He says, oh, that guy, he's a terrorist. And so they go and blow him up. We don't know if he's a terrorist or not. The rule of law has completely disintegrated. Now they're just calling in drone strikes. And they just, what is it, in Yemen recently, they just drone struck a wedding.
15 people.
It's monstrous. And we're going to just get more and more of this blowback until we learn the lesson that if you go poking a hornet's nest, you're going to damn well get stung.
And then when they all attack, they then organize them and give part of Iraq to al-Qaeda and turn them loose on Syria. I'm not a fan of Syria, but, I mean, Syria's not attacking anybody.
Well, where's the self-defense? I mean, in international law, the only legitimate use of a military is in a case of imminent self-defense. And which of the U.S. wars have ever been based upon imminent self-defense? Y'all, if I can use the phrase y'all, have peaceful neighbors to the north and south. You have giant oceans to the east and west. When was the last time America was threatened with invasion? 1812, Canada. It's been about 200 years. I think it might be okay to lay down a few of the weapons and relax in a hammock for a while.
Well, instead they're building a giant army of Mordor to take over the planet and trying to take my guns, so they have the monopoly of force. Stefan Molyneux, our guest, always amazing having him on. Your phone calls are coming up as well, but we're going to cover a host of issues on the other side straight ahead. Going back to Stefan Molyneux, philosopher, researcher, radio talk show host, all-around interesting guy. This is only a 6-minute segment. Some of your calls coming up at the start of the next segment. But looking at all this other news, as the public gets more unlogical, as the public gets more dumbed down, or as one segment of it does, we see a shifting by President Obama and the establishment towards propaganda in entertainment. And they admit this, and not even having news anymore, just getting rid of dinosaur press, attacking alternative media, which is the only media that's left, CNN, MSNBC, over time to leave news entirely, and then just implant their messages in sitcoms, dramas, and have Hollywood stars promote Obamacare, saying it'll lower your prices when it actually increases them. So it's really a war on reality by the establishment. And more I realize they're engaged in a conscious war against common sense. A, do you agree with that? And B, how do we counter it where there's a large minority of us who aren't perfect, but we know fraud when we see it, and we know that free market and liberty works a lot better than collectivist tyranny? How do we reach out to the zombie-fied folks? Because I know smart people that when they see a celebrity on TV start drooling and getting excited and would slit their throat if the celebrity, you know, came down from heaven and talked to them, if the celebrity told them to. How do you get them out of this programming?
Well, of course, the first fraud we need to talk about is the fact that the current pimp for Obamacare is Adam Levine, the singer, who was named sexiest man alive, as if they've never seen you in a thong, Alex. I mean, how? That's the first fraud, that you have not made the cover of People in something incredibly skimpy. So that's once we can crack through the matrix in that standpoint. But what I say to people about Obamacare, it's two very sort of brief points. The first, of course, is that it's completely illegal. The reason, of course, is that the executive in the United States, the president, has no power to pass laws. He has no power to pass laws. Only Congress has that power. Now, they have written 30 times more regulations into Obamacare since it was originally passed, with no input from Congress whatsoever. So 30 times, even if we accept that Congress got the first law right when nobody read it and they lied about it anyway, 30 times the amount of law has been written since it with no no feedback from, no input from Congress. That makes the laws automatically invalid. And they keep changing the rules all the time with no input from Congress. This is a government by fiat. This is fascistic in its essence. The second thing is that over 1,300 organizations have been granted exemptions from Obamacare, including all of the unions and the public sector unions who were behind it to begin with. They're all now begging to be let out of this little hamster cage from hell. And so the reality is that in the Constitution very clearly spells out you must have equal treatment under the law. The moment you pass a law, amend it afterwards with no input from Congress, and then you exempt 1,300 of your closest friends and closest friends organizations from the application of the law. Invalid. Game over. No need for further debate or discussion. But of course, the media doesn't tell anyone this basic stuff.
Exactly. And you know, for me, I know why Oprah Winfrey and MSNBC push racism all day, because in my life and in growing up, what I see, it really is getting a lot better. I mean, everybody's just coming together, basically. That's what I see in Austin, Texas, and all over the country. I see it all over the world. But they got to keep it going, because the real discrimination is that all these special interest groups, coupled with government, are exempt and basically have diplomatic immunity from everything they're foisting on us. It's a unified system. That's the real discrimination. And the real global civil rights movement is about not letting government and corporations be exempt from laws they pass or lobby for.
Yeah, I mean, white Western culture is really pretty good at fighting authority. You know, all the way from the ancient Greeks, who were the first to come up with democracy and philosophy, all the way through the Romans, who tried their very best to limit the power of the state. Of course, it broke through the bonds of what they called the Constitution at the time, just as the American government does. All the way through all the struggles that went on to limit aristocratic power, the ending of the aristocracy throughout most of Europe, the fencing of in England during the Glorious Revolution. We've been pretty good, and I say we very loosely here, but sort of white Western culture has been pretty good at trying to fight centralized and coercive authority. White Western culture was not just at the forefront, but was the sole cultural force that worked and spent blood and treasure worldwide to end the worldwide practice of slavery. Now, we've stumbled and we've created all kinds of messes, but we are, as a culture, really quite good at trying to fight centralized coercive power. And then, of course, even though our ancestors, for want of a better phrase, worked really hard to end the worldwide practice of slavery, generally only white racism is ever talked about, which historically is not exactly accurate.
That's where I want to go next.
You can look at lots of other groups first.
Yeah, I want you to come back and give me the floor on Mandela and that, because I've studied history, and I know slavery was worldwide. But then in the history books, we're taught slavery is a white invention and that whites inherently are the devil. And why is that? Well, because it's the Western. We're launching the whole news division over there the last 2 years, and we really are upping our game. The new studio is about to be up and ready. Got cable systems and stuff we're going to be on early next year. We need folks to use prisonplanet.tv, InfoWarsNews.com for what it was designed for. 11 people can use your membership username, passcode. Just make sure it's not the same username, passcode to your bank account. You know, create an original username, passcode, and then you could probably give 20 friends and family an e-card saying, here's your gift. It's a subscription, live news, tape news, broadcast, 18 years of data on there, been up 11 years of the site itself. The nightly news, the daytime show, which is free to everybody on Infowars.com, but it's in the higher quality there. The nightly news is subscription for folks. All the films, all my documentaries, so many other documentaries, prisonplanet.tv. And if you are a member already, you can get 5 months off the yearly rate when you sign up in the month of December. That special, of course, is going to end in the new year. 5+ months. It comes out to like 5.3 months free when you pay for 6.7 months if you want to get technical. You can do that special for $39.95 a year instead of $54.95, because there's already a couple-month discount when you sign up for a year. Well, it's even more that we add on then, so it comes out to 5.3 months free versus if you just get it month to month at $5.95, or get a monthly membership for $5.95, and then 11 friends and family can simultaneously log in at, say, 7 o'clock at night and watch InfoWars Nightly News. So again, ladies and gentlemen, you are supporting and voting with your dollars the very tip of the spear of true non-state-run media. And the White House-run Media Matters, who brags their White House run, who write the talking points for CNN and MSNBC, they are declaring war now on the alternative media. They realize the dinosaur media, you know, Fox News, God love them, is, you know, mainly targeting people that are geriatric and are phasing out of this plane of consciousness And so what they're really targeting is the internet. What they're targeting is InfoWars and Drudge and WorldNet Daily and anybody else who isn't a total communist. Very, 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 very important. That story's up on Infowars.com. Now, Stefan, I want to get into the media wars. I think the genie's out of the bottle. No matter what they try, they're not going to succeed. But we have CISPA and SOPA and all these other partnerships and attempts to censor the press and using fake copyright. I want your take on the media wars that are coming, where you think that's going. But first, Mandela. I've studied a lot about South Africa, and it seems to me they traded one evil out for another. And I saw your video you did on it last week and thought it was spot on. And you were starting to allude to it. Now, if you really study history, everyone basically had a caste system, or what you call slavery, from India to China to Japan. If a samurai had a new sword, wanted to test it out, they'd go chop a villager up. That was their divine right. Wanted to have sex with you, you had to roll over and let them. And they were kind of a more cultured group of tyranny, you could say. I'm not knocking Japanese culture. Every culture had slaves. Romans had white slaves, had black slaves, you name it. Some Greek societies had what you call slaves. Others didn't and would fight with them over it. There were riots 500 years ago in the transatlantic slave trade because they phased out some white slavery in Europe, so they went on sort of grabbing blacks, which they picked up from the Arabs. Not demonizing Arabs, it's just a fact. The Arabs are still running slavery in North Africa, but that's trendy and cool. We're told it's a different type of slavery. All I hear all day is I'm bad, Western culture's bad, and Western culture is dying, and the Western elite are helping kill it. Why are they doing that? You've got the floor.
Well, there's a small topic to deal with. Well, I mean, very briefly, of course, as you know, whites did not go to Africa and go into the country and capture, the peaceful slaves or peaceful blacks and drag them off in slavery. Whites couldn't survive in Africa because we didn't have the immune system to deal with all the plagues. The average life expectancy for a white who left the coast and went inland was about 11 months. So the black slave trade and the Arab slave trade, the Middle Eastern slave trade was humming along, and whites went in and bought the slaves from the coastal cities and took them away. All nasty stuff. I mean, slavery is a fundamental moral abomination. Nobody has any argument with that.
I read the British reports from 300 years ago where on average a third of the ship would die of the white sailors just going to pick up slaves, and that was why the first multicultural pirate ships were created. It wasn't that they wanted to even revolt. It was a death sentence if you came back on a second mission. Go ahead.
Well, and the whites who were sailing the ships were themselves slaves. They were press ganged into this. I mean, it was the government power which is evil all over the world, pretty much, which needs to be fought. But so what happened, of course, was with a sort of an awakening consciousness, which came out of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, egalitarianism, the spirit of man, the universality of ethics, and so on, which was, of course, in the Declaration of Independence and was supposed to be a more foundational part of the U.S. Constitution. They started to say, well, maybe owning other human beings like livestock is not really that great an idea. And the Royal Navy sailed around the seas, not in terms of conquest, there certainly was that element to it, but they were out there trying to catch slavers and trying to end the practice of slavery. The British government bribed many Arabic governments to have them stop, paid slave owners to have them stop having their slaves. And they had to catch these slave ships really quickly, because if you were a slave ship, a Royal Navy ship comes up behind you, if they think they're going to catch, if you think you're going to get caught, you cut the throats of your slaves and you dump them in the water. They had to catch them under cover of night. They had to steal on the ships to do this. This is how committed they were to ending this moral abomination called slavery. And this is nowhere taught. It is nowhere understood, because I think fundamentally white guilt is a very profitable resource for people to tweak. You know, you make a white person feel guilty, they'll be like, oh, here's some benefits, here's affirmative action, here's taxes, here's whatever you want, just stop making me feel guilty.
And then that hamstrings the people that are getting the handouts. And then that hamstrings the people that are becoming dependent.
Right. Yeah, and of course in Africa now, South Africa in particular, I mean, it's monstrous. Apartheid, of course, was immoral and racist and so on, but we do have to look to some degree at the relative ethics at the time. All of the other blacks in Africa were dying to get into South Africa. I visited there a few times and have a little bit of experience there. People were trying to get into South Africa. 60% of blacks and whites now say that they were better off under apartheid. And if you're saying that you're better off under apartheid, that is not exactly a ringing endorsement of your current system. South Africa is the rape and murder capital of the world at the moment. It is a disintegrating country, and I think it's partly because they didn't really go back and learn the lessons of the American Revolution, and you had a bunch of communists, of which Nelson Mandela was first and foremost. He wrote a treatise in his youth called How to Be a Good Communist, did not explicitly reject these views, and so so the virus of socialism landed in Africa in the same way that it landed after the Raj ended in 1949 in India. You get all these socialists who go out there and try and set up this central planning communist socialist dystopia, and then things go to heck in a handbasket, and nobody sits there and says, well, it's because people aren't free to trade and own property and government's interfering with everything. It's the same lesson that we learned brutally for hundreds of years, and we've forgotten to teach other people.
Well, George Orwell valiantly joined the communists because he'd been a member of the British Imperial Police. Eric Blair was his real name, until he went and fought in the Abraham Lincoln Brigades and got shot in the throat in the Spanish Civil War against Hitler's forces. And then he wrote about in his books, I read them, how the communist leaders were actually just like bank robber, criminal rapists who were using all the well-meaning communists to set up and just take over, and that they couldn't beat the Nazis because the communists were just so criminal they couldn't even organize. The Nazis were actually ideologues who believed what they were doing. And it's just incredible.
There is this belief that we have, you know, ordinary criminals like pickpockets and so on, and then we have organized criminals like the mafia and so on, and then above those people, like this archway above society, is this glowing godhood of statism that protects us from all these nasty little people. I think that the historically accurate, if not currently accurate view, is that the incompetent criminals are out there picking your pockets. The more competent criminals are organizing into mobs, but the most competent criminals run for office and end up in charge of the state. They are the best of the best. They're not there to protect you from criminals because they're kind of pursuing the same methodology, but better.
And that's what Zbigniew Brzezinski has said in 3 of his books. He admits that they run every criminal operation to control it for our own good, though, Stefan. We've got to be thankful they launder the drug money and run the little kids and, you know, do everything. We've got to be thankful they made drugs illegal to make larger profits. See how they helped us?
Well, of course, you hear this argument all the time. Without the government and the police, who on earth would protect your property, Alex? First of all, if you're allowed to own your own weaponry, your property is pretty safe to begin with. And secondly, how can I claim that somebody is there to protect my property when they take over 50% of it at source, and not even counting unfunded liabilities, debts, and deficits? When they take about 50% of my money,
that's right.
How can they be said to be protecting my money?
That's right. The average cop can be a really good person. On average, I've actually found them to be, you know, a lot of them are servants. But it doesn't matter. The big state is there to support, as you've said, and protect the farm animals from rogue wolves and coyotes that might try to come snack on a pig or a goat or a sheep or a chicken, or, you know, stop a weasel. The larger weasel is guarding the hen house from other weasels that aren't in his employ. The system is there to protect their racket over us, and now they're getting greedy and have created an Agenda 21 cosmology nomenclature where they fantasize that social engineering is looting us to reduce us down to the level of beggars to save the earth, while they themselves are the ones with government mismanagement allowing the degradation of the environment. It's incredible. I mean, the fruits of these people is literally liquid death.
Well, you know, one of the great tragedies of history, Alex, is that a truly free market doesn't have much use for sophists and sociopaths and all of the predatory wordsmiths of the upper classes. And so when there's a free market, you know what you have to do. You do this with your show. I do this with my show. We go out and we try to produce value to people on a voluntary basis. If they don't like us, they can just switch us off. If they find us offensive, they can turn us off. But we still have to go out there and provide truth on a voluntary basis. But if you're a politician, everyone's going to listen to you because you're in charge of all the weaponry in the known universe and beyond. So when you have a truly free market, all of the verbally adept, sociopathic busybodies who want to tell everyone else what to do can't really do it because they can try and boss you around. You're like, click, turn them off, don't care. And so these kinds of people can't really adapt to the free market. They want to retain the power, the political power, to push everyone around. And, you know, the endless interfering busybodies of the human race would have precious little to do without the state. And that's one of the reasons why they like the state. It gives them this massive platform to move us all around like the little pawns, like the little ants, like the livestock that they think we are. The tragedy is they can only do it with our fundamental consent.
That's right. And it literally becomes an ether in which unnatural people that no one would want to associate with can now attain power and success instead of the natural, virtuous way whoever is the most hardworking, the most loving, the most creative, the most beautiful, the most honorable becomes the example of society, that others emulate that, and you go to Alpha Centauris and to the next level of human development. But if you go with who has the most weapons, the most thugs, the most intimidation, the best BS, you build systems of BS to where the public then mimics that, civilization collapses, and then it restarts over with virtue again, then we become decadent and corrupt. The problem is we can't go through that cycle again because they're going to destroy the planet with the weaponry this time. They must be stopped.
Well, I agree with that, and there is this awful thing that is fundamental where people say, well, Barack Obama or Sarkozy or Putin or whoever it is, they should be in charge. They should be telling everyone what to do. They know the way things should be. And I would love to see a world, Alex, where these guys had the power of, say, an advice column. You know, where you could write into these guys and say, Barack Obama, how should I deal with my health care? And he'd say, well, I, as a constitutional law professor, I believe that you should do X, Y, blah, blah, whatever, right? I'd love to just see them have the power of an advice column. Or, you know, they'd have a hotline. You'd call them up and say, Barack, I don't really know what to do with 50% of my income. What do you think I should do? He said, well, you should spend it on this, 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 and this. That's what I want. They don't have the power to compel our obedience, but they actually have to win us over with reason and evidence. Wouldn't that be a beautiful world?
Exactly. Instead, they blow stuff up or let people blow stuff up and then fearmonger until we give up all of our rights. Let me ask you this, then we're going to go to phone calls. Where do you, Stefan Molyneux, where do you think this battle in your gut, just as Gestalt, is going? Is liberty losing or winning? And will the globalists blow stuff up?
You were gonna get flecks of foam on your webcam because this is a topic I actually feel quite quite passionate about. So I will give you my very, very brief answer to that. There is no momentum in history. There is no great movements of history that push us around. We are not pinballs in the endless bumper. Sorry, for your younger audience, you'll have to ask your parents what that means. We're not pinballs bumping around the bumpers of some giant cosmic pinball machine. Where the world goes is where committed, passionate, knowledgeable communicators make it go. It's where you make it go. It's where I make it go. It's where your listeners make it go in their conversations, in their lives. Where does history go? Where is the momentum of human history? In the willpower of committed individuals and in no other place. Now, it's true that if committed people of intelligence and integrity and willpower do nothing, then yes, the worst tends to overcome the better. Like if you sit on your couch, you get fatter, not leaner. And if we do nothing, then yes, evil wins. But all we have to do is get off our butts and make the world uncomfortable for the conformists, which provokes them into thinking, like you sharpen a sword against a spinning sand wheel. Then we just go and make the world uncomfortable. We push the world where we want it to go. We make the world go where we want it to go because we have the better arguments.
Exactly.
We have the greater evidence. And the accumulated evidence of history is completely on our side.
I agree, and the statists all say this. Cass Sunstein says, we'll infiltrate the alternative media, discredit it by acting, bad, putting out racism, disinfo, and they say we've got to just keep pushing, pushing, pushing. They even admit in their own papers, they all want freedom. The average person wants to be a libertarian or beyond, but we've got to act like they're all alone. We've got to just dominate them, whip them, break their will. And so the crazy thing is they write all these books like we're not reading them. I think their arrogance is going to undo them. So we have to make them uncomfortable everywhere, just like they do us. And that's what I do. And it's not a tiring thing, folks. Once you start doing this, it's like finally breathing. Oh, I was supposed to do this. This is the animating contest of liberty that Jefferson talked about.
Yes, and don't you remember when you were a kid and you did something bad or did something wrong, which basically meant you disagreed with the authority and ease of the powers that be in your school or wherever? What would they say to you? They'd say, Alex Jones, young Alex Jones, this is going to go on your permanent record. And those words were like, oh my goodness, it's going to be tattooed on my forehead and so on. And now, of course, we all have a genuine permanent record called everything we ever do on the internet or in a bank machine or using our credit card through the NSA. And what has it done? It has done fundamentally nothing to us other than give us more ammunition to push back against this encroaching tyranny.
Exactly. Call their bluff, double down on life. Get crazed. I mean, humans are meant to be wild and full of life and instead of just waddling around wearing sports jerseys, watching steroid heads push each other around and grab each other's butts. I mean, it's just, there's so much more in the universe than watching Obama or watching John Boehner or watching all these people. That's what I hate is how the statists make us look at them, make us talk about them, even to block them. We need to make them where they're the joke they are. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, look, I mean, what are we as a species? How did we evolve? We evolved as hunter-gatherers. Now, we've all just kind of thrown the hunter side aside, you know, and we've just become these gatherers. Like, oh, look, there's some nuts called welfare or the military-industrial complex.
Exactly. Stay there. Finish that thought. Finish that thought. We're going to be right back. When the music's playing, they can't hear me. We're going to be right back, folks. Stay with us. About the hunter.
Yeah, just we've lost our, I think, to some degree, masculinity. Bring back the masculinity, bring back the spine. We've just become these gatherers looking for the rotten fruits of power that drip down on our tables and going, like what a great meal. Let's go out and hunt ourselves some freedom. It's all language, it's all reason, it's all evidence. There's no weaponry that's going to set us free, because the real prison, the real state, the real tyranny is in the mind. But we can blow through that stuff with reason and evidence.
And once you
really
shift into the hunter mode
and bring down a big predator called freedom. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I agree. Once we shift into hunter mode against the enemy, that's combat mode as well. They're shifted into that with deceit. We shift into the hunter mode with liberty. We're going to kick their butt.
And we all love combat. Are you talking about sports? Sports is combat. I mean, how well do combat movies show? We all love combat. It's invigorating. The great mistake, of course, has been to try to get a fight with weapons rather than with language, rather than with philosophy, rather than with reason and evidence. But when you get into that mode, it's really invigorating. People look at that and say, oh, there's so much fighting. It's so tense. It must be so stressful. It's kind of what we're built for, people. This is why we're not in the caves. This is why we're not jellyfish or amoeba anymore. I mean, most of us. So I think that it's really, I invite people to take on the combat. It's what Andrew Breitbart used to say, walk towards the fire. Walk towards the fire, because if you run away, it's going to catch you only with your back turned.
Absolutely. God bless you. That's very well said. God bless the atheism. It's a endearing term. Let's talk to Greg in Pennsylvania. Thanks for holding, brother. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Hello there, gentlemen. I'd like to throw something out there that nobody has talked about. It would be the Farm Bill, and the role and what the farmers would play in things as they progress. And I'm a small farmer. I have to work a 50-hour-a-week job just to keep the farm going and keep everything going. And it's just, I'd just like to get your take on the Farm Bill, or I guess we could call it the food stamp bill, and what will be a good, Well,
I'll be honest with you. I've read some about it, but it's always changing. You're the expert. Give us your brief take on it, then we'll get Stefan's take.
Well, from what I read of it, it's basically a food stamp bill. 80% of it is food stamps, and none of it that I know helps me, a small farmer.
That's what they do. They always get control of the economy and then call it one thing and do another. I know this. American farmers were much more prosperous, and there were more of them before government got involved. They're replacing it with Big Agri. Only Big Agri knows how to get the incentives and the free deals. Let's get Stefan's take on that. God bless you, Greg. Good question.
Well, on the right, the Republican Party gets an average donation of about $50 each. In other words, small farmers can help the Republican Party. On the left, the Democratic Party has refused to release the size of their average donation, because I'm not even going out on a limb to guess that it's far larger than that, because it comes from a lot of rich elites in the media and in the entertainment industry and so on. So one of the problems is the people on the left, they want bigger and bigger organizations, because the small people, they like to fund parties that are focusing on smaller government and free trade, like the Republican Party. So when you get big aggregate groups together, that tends to benefit the left. And so when you start to give farm subsidies, then you start to make it more profitable to lobby politicians.
It's up to all of us to exercise our Second Amendment. That's why I love the open carries that have not caused any problems nationwide like we had at the Alamo, is because it shows, hey, it's not dirty that I have a gun. And I liken it to Martin Luther King going into the places where you couldn't, if you were black, the bathrooms, the hotels, the restaurants. It's the same thing with an open carrier. It's the same thing suing when the police arrest you for your legal, lawful gun. You've got to do it, ladies and gentlemen. You've got to have these marches. So in closing, Eric, anything else you'd like to add? You're the victim of this, the owner going out to their car. Any other tidbits or points you think people should know about where this lawsuit's going now, this federal lawsuit, because the county's done nothing?
All I can say is just beware of the police out there. And I don't know where it's going. We're trying to push and trying to get something done. But all I can say is just just pray for us. We're trying to work. We're trying to get something solved for this.
I mean, I just saw the new New York police chief came out and said, trust us, we're your friends. Why are they having to talk like that? Because the police are being given political directives that are unconstitutional and aren't common law and aren't common sense. The police are wildly popular when they have good departments and follow the Bill of Rights. So the police, you're saying, again, talking to your lawyer, Shannon Braley, both your police were both your parents were Atlanta police. So growing up in that, I know you probably have a lot of inside baseball on it.
Right.
What do you think's happening here?
Yeah, I was an officer for 7 years. A lot of times people in the community, they will contact the city council and make complaints, and then they'll complain to the white shirts, the upper echelon, and they'll be like, instead of thinking and having thoughtful dialogue with the officers, they'll be like, give me bodies, give me bodies. And, this is, again, like I said before, this is a job that requires thought. It's like being a surgeon or anything else. So, this isn't putting on parts to a machine in a factory. It requires thought to every single situation, and they don't encourage that. They just say, give me bodies. And, I believe that it's going to take, people, bringing things like this to light, that yes, it's terrible to have crime, and yes, we want the bad guys to be arrested, but not at the sacrifice of, basic fundamental, human rights that we have.
But they knew he had a concealed carry. I mean, they knew he didn't have a criminal record. They knew he was a good guy. And they still just said, okay, instead of saying they were wrong, which they weren't even wrong, instead of just saying, okay, false alarm, have a nice day, they had to take him to jail. It's that idea of, well, a lot of departments don't want to hire intelligent police now, and that's because the establishment wants a tyranny.
Exactly. And, he knew he was wrong. That's why he turned up the radio on the way to the jail. He knew he was wrong. He didn't want to feel guilted by, Mr. Lee. And, they count on people sweeping things under the rugs like an arrest is no big deal. Well, it was a big deal for Eric. And, and it was a big deal that they continued to hold his property. So I think...
Oh, yeah, that's the big issue. Still hadn't got his gun back.
They continue to endorse this behavior.
Well, you're a good lawyer, Shannon Braley, and if I was ever in Georgia and needed one, I'll give you a call. Are there any websites we can visit? Are there ways we can support you guys?
You can go to www.brileylaw.com, BRILEYLAW.com, and I have a Facebook page. It's facebook.com/BrileyLaw. And I'm sorry, I've been sick this week, so that's my voice is hoarse.
Oh, you sound great. Thank you. Listen, Eric Lee, God bless you for what you're doing. We'll check in with you again as the lawsuit develops, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, there's folks fighting back against just out-of-control government, folks. I'm telling you, this government is out of control. I want America back. I've been hammering it the last, 3-4 years. It's been really obvious. Obama's been in now for 6 years, that he is becoming a dictator. And I remember having Pastor David Manning on, Pastor James David Manning, 6-7 years ago when he's first talking about Obama. And he was saying, he's going to become a dictator. He's not going to leave. I tell you, he's pure evil. And I'm like, come on. He's just a front man to push their agenda. Presidents are puppets. Come on. Let's not. Come on. That's going to add to the division here. We need to, they're trying to sell him as the second coming of Christ and Abraham Lincoln all rolled into one, but can't be that bad. And now I've got to say that Manning has been correct and I have been wrong in understating how bad Obama would be. Let me explain something. He put our military under NATO UN command, and when Congress threatened him and said this is unconstitutional and illegal, he sent them letters and had the Joint Chiefs testify belligerently that they get their orders from the UN and NATO. He played that audio. 3 separate hearings, House and Senate Armed Services Committees in the last 3 years, 3 times. He is shutting down, it's over 500 now. They're shutting down 500 more. Coal power plants that are totally clean, supply 50+% of our power. Well, they did. Now plants supply like 30-something. They're shutting us down. And then General Electric can scale up and make more money. They're exempt. That's martial law. He's legalizing all the illegals, basically. And this is in the news, by fiat, without even an order. He just tells them on the phone what to do. Like he's beyond Kim Jong-il of North Korea or Kim Jong-un. At least they'll even do a fake order. on paper and put a fake stamp on it. He just says, hey, my word is God, God Emperor. He's now doing it with Obamacare. They're saying, yes, make him a dictator, he'll fix it. Now Democrats are saying, let's make him president for a third term, or let's just suspend things, or let's just... And it's a whole bunch of areas, folks, and they've gotten away with Fast and Furious, the IRS persecuting Christians and gun groups and pro-lifers, and the FBI covering it up. And I mean, Benghazi and Fast and Furious, it goes on and on and on and on. And then I realized in Libya and invading Africa with UN armies that are just murdering people in mass, backed by Muslims and animists, killing Christians everywhere. I mean, if it's evil, they're doing it. They don't even do it for an interest now, except to further evil. Again, it's scary when you got corrupt boss hog politicians that do bad stuff for power. But when they're doing it, even though it's destroying Obama, even though it's making him be hated, they don't care, because it is a mission to bankrupt America. Obamacare, all of it, it is on record to bring this country down. Now, the architect of it, Ezekiel Emanuel, admits it. So he joins us via phone to the bottom of the hour with a quick pop-in. I want to get him for a full hour soon via video Skype from his Atla TV studios there in Harlem, where he actually tries to preach a message that's going to get people out of the plantation that is socialism. And he feeds hundreds of children a day and others with their soup kitchens. And he joins us right now, so he's a really good guy. Pastor Manning, thank you for coming on with us today, sir.
Oh, Alex, thank you for having me today. Real joy.
Well,
real pleasure.
Thank you. I mean, you've got the floor for the little bit of time we've got. He is a dictator now. Now, the question is he making the office a dictatorship? Will he leave?
Well, but I think that we need to understand Obama in terms of modern dictatorship. Generally, when we think about dictators like Hitler, Mussolini, or Lenin, or others, we think about them using the military to deploy their policies and to keep people in control. Obama has found a way to use an economic, racial, and social policies as if the military. In other words, what Obama does with these policies of economics, with racism, which is the undergirding of his presidency, and then social issues, which are anti-Christian, anti-God, many of them very communist and very Marxist, is his new army. And so he's a modern dictator, and we have to think about him in those terms.
Man, you really are smart. I mean, the way you crystallize things, that's it. Obama is the modern 2.0 dictator.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the next thing we need to begin to think about is what are we going to do about him? And in your opening piece, you stated that I stated 6 years ago that he would not leave office and that he would become a dictator. In fact, he came in as a dictator. What we need to think about now is how are we going to move him if we're going to save America? How are we going to get him out of office? Because he has such power over the courts, Alex. I mean, the very fact that Obamacare was approved by Judge Roberts indicates this man has power over the courts. Franklin Roosevelt tried to pack the courts so he could get his policies through. All Obama has to do is pick up the phone, and his policies are approved. So how are we going to get him out of office? What are we going to do? We can't rely upon the Republicans or the conservatives or whoever it is that is supposed to be opposing him, because they're not doing that. If we're going to save this nation and stop Obama from trashing it and doing what he wants to do with it, we have to start thinking about strategies and not relying upon the electoral system or the Republicans or the media, which is the other part of his government, to be able to save America.
Very well said. And I think we've got to communicate to people that it's a modern form of technocratic dictatorship. And I was thinking they were setting up dictatorial divisions and systems so that the office could be dictatorial. But they are acting like they don't care what we think now, and that they are trying to bring the country down and bankrupt it so that he can then pose as a savior. How do you expect him to try to stay in office? Because for the first time, I'm starting to think that may be the plan.
Well, I suspect that he's most probably going to have some sort of a false flag. I think he's going to need martial law. He's going to need the military in order to be able to stay in office. And there's no telling what he'll do in terms of some sort of a false flag that he'll create. Maybe a crisis within America, some sort of a possible racial crisis. While I don't think that might be it. On the other hand, Alex, the thing that we have to be very mindful of is that there are a large number of Americans who are ready now to revolt, and they very well may give him what he wants. On the other hand, we need a revolution in this nation.
So we want it to be like Lexington or Concord. We want to work to not let it get physical and win the info war, the war of ideas. But if they start stuff, I think we should be more, Christ-like and at key points.
Well, I'm not so sure we should be so Christ-like unless we're going to be the Christ of the sword that I preach for the most part. I think. Well,
let me just finish the statement. Let me just finish the statement so you know where I'm coming from.
Okay.
I'm saying we have to wait for the right time to where it morally they fire first, and then we have the moral high ground. We don't want them to trick us into something preemptive. The problem is they'll blow up another federal building like OKC. The same attorney general was deputy then, clearly involved, to then blame it on the liberty movement. So I understand that we may have to defend ourselves. My problem is that they may blow something up and blame it on us. So the last thing we want to do is offensively do anything. Go ahead.
Well, you definitely don't want that to happen. You don't want them to blame us on 9/11 or some other event or the Oklahoma event. That we don't want to have happen. What we also have to think about, Alex, is that Obama controls the economy. He controls Wall Street. So we're going to need economic power, not just military power or revolutionary power. We need economic power, and that's the thing that we're lacking most in. I mean, all of America is armed to the teeth. There are people all over America that are ready to rise up if they have to save this nation. Not because they're belligerent, not because they hate the nation, not because they're just warmongering, but they realize that we need to be able to save this nation militarily. But the problem is this, is that we don't have the kind of economic power or the media power to be able to withstand a Obama attack, which is what he's doing now. So how do we get that together? How do we do that is the question.
I think you're right. People better support alternative real media like never before, whether it's what you're doing at Atla, and we're going to give that site out in just a moment, and we'll put it up on screen, or InfoWars or Drudge or any of the sites. In fact, Richard, will you scroll down so I can put his site up on air for folks? It's atla.org, atlah.org. It's an excellent site. We need to do that. I think we need to just get the word out. But I'll tell you this. I was talking to an Army officer just yesterday. I'll just leave it at that. And he said 98% of the military knows what's going on now. Now, just 6 months ago, he said it was about 80%. He said 98% know that there's an attempt to overthrow the country and to bring in tyranny. And I think we need to get the word out that we're not alone, and that but we're not connected because we don't have the media and we don't have the financial system. So it's really a bizarre situation, almost like a Mexican standoff.
Well, I think we're going to have to attack the media as the first line of Obama defense. The media serves as his pawns or as his bishops. We're going to have to go after the media. We're going to have to support media like you. And I'm just not patronizing you, Alex, but we're going to have to begin to listen to sources like you and other sources that are out there. But we're going to have to attack as the first line of defense all of the media, whether it's conservative or liberal media. They all do the exact same thing. And when we can bring them out, we can stop the disinformation campaign. Because people are sitting there in their comfortable chairs, listen to Fox News, thinking that somehow or another Mitt Romney or somebody else is going to overthrow Obama and we're going to get America back. We've got to take down that part of Obama's process.
I agree.
We have got to attack him, and then we can go after him economically.
No, you're right. It's the idea of the loyal opposition. When those guys are all part of the same power structure and they're also scared, I mean, those big people, it's really hard for people that are already part of the system to stand up. But look at how they're going after Ted Cruz and Rand Paul. You can always tell who's real by who they attack.
You absolutely can. And I think that if we began to work on that strategy and look at how the politicians are attacked, and look at what Fox News does, or what the liberal, or what MSNBC does, if we began to consider that if we're going to have a revolution, let's do it the way Obama has taken the nation. He has taken.
Stay there. If we had more preachers in this country like Pastor Manning, we would not be in the shape we are. People have just become so complacent, they've got to find their spirit of resistance before things really go to hell in a handbasket, because Homeland Security all of these top generals and colonels at the Navy War College, the Army War College, you name it, West Point, we have links to it up on Infowars.com, are saying, we're preparing for war with gun owners. We're going to come after you. We will take your gun from your cold, dead hand. And the military's totally waking up because they're being told, prepare for war with America. So I think they've miscalculated. I mean, the military is not afraid to go to war. And, I mean, the military people I know that are multi-generation military are the most honorable, including people in my family. And let me tell you, they're not looking for a fight, folks. They're very sad about everything. But now the resolve is beginning to be, okay, it's going to be a civil war. I just feel sorry for the police and all the idiots that are going to be part of the New World Order who want to have this civil war. I mean, look at this headline. Colonel who vowed to disarm Americans works with Homeland Security. He teaches at West Point. And it says, oath-violating colonel also made veiled death threats against bloggers. Well, my goodness, if you read his article in Esquire, it sounds like a little kid. Like, oh, yeah, we'll kill you. We got the Army. We're big. We're tough. I mean, this is obviously somebody who I don't think seen a lot of combat, or he's nuts. Because all the combat vets I know, and I mean special forces people, I mean people that have been in 28 years and seen stuff, I mean, just unbelievable. They would never... I mean, I know people that, that have worked in and around the boys from Virginia, and I don't mean the CIA. The Virginia boys are like plainclothes military above Delta Force. And all I can, Pastor Manning, I've got you here to talk. We got 4 minutes till break. I'm going to shut up. You hear what I'm saying. This is getting so bad. Do you think Obama's bit off more than he can chew, or do you think that this is part of the plan?
Oh, absolutely not. He has not bitten off more than he can chew. And I think his plan is in place and working right now perfectly. The problem is that we've got to deal with is that we're in the game very late. And if there is a military coup, I know there are many generals and people within the military who recognize what's happening to this nation and would love to be able to save it. But I don't think they're going to get the kind of support that they need in order to be able to do it. And I don't think that a coup in the military would deliver us from the economic power that Obama is possessing. And there's another thing that we're not observing as well in terms of the social and racial issue. I'm becoming very concerned about Obama's alliance with Pope Francis. I'm very concerned about them walking along the same social, if you will, liberal path that destroys the integrity of the Word of God and puts these two powers together. Alex, I'm very concerned about that and whether a military response can handle where we are right now.
I hear you. No, I can't believe that the president has become a dictator and they're starting to have a few hearings, but it's still not a big deal. I mean, because this is what happens historically. Countries get to where they put up with evil, and then we empower the dictator to become a Hitler or a Mao. Pastor Manning, do you think we can turn this around?
I'm confident that we can, but we must acknowledge what I said just a few moments ago. We are late to the game, but we have the majority on our side. We have the morality on our side. We have all of the issues that we need on our side. We just need to acknowledge what they are and put together a plan. Obama has been planning this with the New World Order and others for years. We are late to the game. We're just getting in here, but we can win, and we can win handily. There's no way we should be defeated. So yes, but we need to get started, and we need to get started immediately, if not beyond before that.
Well, you say, not use their tactics, but beat them knowing their game. What's your idea?
Well, first of all, as I said before, we got to take down the media, Alex. I mean, we have got to take down what I refer to as the dung-head media, because they've got people pacified into thinking that Washington, the Republicans or whoever, or politicians are going to solve our problems. We got to stop people from thinking that, wake them up to the fact that they need to get into the streets, not necessarily with arms or with margin, but they need to get into the program of looking at what can we do economically, socially, and racially to bring this nation back together again. And once they recognize that Washington is not going to solve it, that it must be done by grassroots movement, at least we'll have a start at that present time. And what we'll also discover is that Obama's power is not as great as one would think that it is if the people that know the truth simply rise up.
Sure. Sure. Well, somebody can kick your butt if you lay down and let them.
Absolutely.
We just got to stand up. I want to come back and go over some issues with you and pick your brain, because I'll tell you, you're just really a smart guy, and I mean that seriously. Pastor Manning really saw stuff long before I did. Rosemary's Baby. It really is the stuff of legend. How his whole family, CIA, Pastor Manning's had the CIA and FBI come to his office and threaten him. We've had the same thing. FBI, Secret Service, you name it. All sorts of things behind the scenes. I mean, the minute they can, folks, they want to come after everybody and basically force a civil war. That's probably going to be their plan. And we just need to not have it happen. And again, it sounds real wimpy on air to say, you know, I don't want a military coup, or I think we should lay down to an attack by these people. This isn't about a military fight. If we don't respond when they attack us in the first wave of a purge, even with the controlled press, the message will get out that they did it. But here's the deal. They're not going to do that. If they try a purge, they will blow up federal buildings filled with daycare children. We know the names of who did Oklahoma City. I've interviewed the police officers, the head of the K-9 unit, Don Browning from Oklahoma City. He knew the feds did it. They came to his office, and he's listed their names on air and said, we're going to kill you and your wife if you don't shut up. By the way, I got death threats when I had him on, and I mean the real ones. Because you know the people that did that run the Justice Department right now. And again, I literally, it's like stepping on the edge of a cliff whenever I get on air and talk about this kind of stuff, okay? I mean, so when I say we need to have restraint, it's not that I'm not willing to get in a fight. It's that not going to hurt the New World Order to have a shootout with the state police. We've got, before we're going to kill these people, we really need to go out and try to wake them up. That's the point, and that's what Manning's getting at, is we have got to absolutely reach out to police and military right now. The military has really woken up. Police are starting to, but they kind of pick them to where they'll follow orders so that they see the rest of the story and get uncompartmentalized. Now Manning, Pastor Manning, I want to give you the last 6-7 minutes here. You've got the floor. Don't pause for me. Any other ideas, how we turn this around, where you see this going? You know, how I mean, maybe citizens that are at Obama events yell out things. I mean, so little stuff like you're a liar in Congress. We don't know. There's all sorts of little things that could bring down the facade.
Well, when we talk about a coup and a military confrontation, we have to keep in mind that Obama comes from a very violent background, though he tries to present himself as the boy next door. Obama's the product of Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn and all that weather underground crowd. He comes from a very violent background. Keep that in mind. His association with Islam is very violent. But I think in terms of strategy, Alex, one of the things that we would probably look at and after we take down the media, and we need to do that because without that we're going to continually be beat by Obama. We need to go after Obamacare. That is an Achilles heel. It's a massive tax program that's unconstitutional, that's socialist, that's communist at its core. But he needs young people to be able to register and be a part of that process. If young people don't register, Obamacare falls apart. Now, the whole business with the rollout and the fact that the computer did not work, they're going to get that together at some point in time. But if we can go out, launch a national campaign with a broadcast such as yours and others to reach young people that they don't sign up, that they're not cowed into signing up for Obamacare, if that can happen, then the whole thing falls apart. Because at that point, Obama will not have the financing to be able to keep Obamacare alive. And what he'll have to do at that point is do something more dictatorial than he's doing right now. So I would suggest that what we would do, number one, is take down the media. Number two is take down Obamacare. And doing it through the people, pardon me, doing it through the young people who don't want Obamacare and then turning them around against him because they were all for him at one point in time, but not anymore. And they're definitely not going to sign up for Obamacare. If we do those two things, at least we'll begin to put a crack in his armor. And we'll begin to educate the people, and we can take him down economically the way he's trying to take us down economically and socially.
Again, you pause for me and interject, but everything you're saying is just spot on with the research and great ideas. And I just thank God for your leadership and many others. And I wish there were more people out there who understood all these different nuances, because it's scary to know people are waking up, but that there's not that many prominent people that are willing to come up with a battle plan. But let me ask you this question. I've noticed evil loves to betray its own minions historically, and I don't understand that as a person that doesn't know betrayal. I don't like betraying even people that are enemies and bad. In fact, crushing them, it feels like a betrayal, even though I'm not betraying them. I'm standing up for myself. But with Obama, he loves, here's an example. Barton Springs. I went down there 2 months ago, to the big open pool. They got like 20 lifeguards, one of the biggest natural pools in the U.S., spring-fed. And one after the other, they walked over and apologized. And they said, I thought you were wrong about Obamacare. They just cut me from 40 hours to 20. And they take more money out of my check now, and I work another job, and I go to UT, and I eat ramen noodle. My parents are poor. I don't have any money. They're taking like $50 more out of my check. Like you said, they lied on the news, and everywhere the poor Obama people apologize. How could the communist even betray their own idiot followers? And I'm not trying to be mean, but it's just, how do you hurt poor people like this? And how does he think he'll get away with that?
I think the thing we have to always keep in focus about communism and socialism and Marxism and Islam is that it has never worked. There is no nation on the planet where it has worked, where it has proven to win the love of the people, where we in a democracy and in capitalism here love our nation for what it is. Most communist people that are at the bottom of the communist rung don't care for communism and want to get out from underneath it. And it takes the military to keep communism going. So I think that when we look at what Obama's trying to do and what the New World Order thinks that they can accomplish, however, they're using more high technology now than they've used in perhaps a Mao Zedong or in Lenin's communism. We're going to have to recognize that communism really at the heart of the matter with people doesn't work. So how do we get the message out? Rather than talking about a different political ideal, such as a Republican versus a Democrat, we've got to tell people about the ills of communism. We got to go into, and I think our fourth program would be, we've got to get into the universities and into the schools, because that's where they're indoctrinating our young people into thinking that communism is a good thing and that Obama's program is a good thing. So we have to, if we do these basic things, we win. If we don't do them, we definitely lose.
Well, I want to be clear. I mean, when you see how Obama tries to take the radical Islamicist al-Qaeda people from Saudi Arabia and to inject them into Syria for 2.5 years and then call that peace, I mean, it really does show that this particular elite we have, I mean, look how the NFL promotes him. Look at how the whole system's giving their power to him, showing the power structures behind him. Do you think Obama's paying off the way they thought? Because as you said, if Obamacare is blowing up in their face, well, they knew it was going to blow up in the face. So he's got to become a dictator because his whole agenda is going to backfire. They're going to end up losing a whole generation to believing in communism because they're giving them a taste of it before they have full dictatorship in.
Well, if you look at the stock market, well, Obamacare is blowing up in his face. But if you look at the stock market, he is greatly rewarding people that have invested in him. If you're talking about major people in the movies or in business and entrepreneurship, they are reaping great rewards, the greatest in the history of this nation. They reaping their financial rewards as for supporting him. But they're just a small percentage of the population. And they're not in control, but they are. And
it's in fiat devalued dollars, and it's not going to be worth anything. It's all a fraud. It's all hot air.
That's true. That's true. And I think that the American people need to wake up and and of course, prepare themselves for when the financial collapse comes, and it will come, whether Obama's in power or not. That's coming, and that will be another opportunity once the financial collapse comes for those of us who've been out here on the battlefield to take the power reins at that time when the economy is weak and people are dependent on their billions to be able to give them power. We have power by our commitment. We have power by our love for this nation. We have power by our love for one another. That's our power, and we're rich in the billions in that, and we ought to use it as much as we possibly can.
I agree. I can feel your power, Pastor Manning, because you have love, and I can hear it and see it in other people's voices. I just feel sad for the average person. Doesn't seem to have any discernment. I mean, you could take one look at Obama and tell he's a devil. I just didn't know how bad. What in your spirit told you 6, 7 years ago or even longer that Obama was so bad?
Yeah, well, you remember I was on your show very early on and talking to you about Obama being the son of Satan. And a lot of people call him the Antichrist, and that will work. You certainly don't want to throw that out. But Obama is inherently evil. When you listen to what he is saying over against a reality of where we are as the people, you know that he is lying, and that he is lying profusely. Obama did this one thing, Alex. He promised the world, not just America, but he promised the world what they wanted to hear and knew that he could not deliver it. He promised the world you were going to have peace and you're going to have prosperity. We're going to have a unity of the people. We're going to bring all the nations to the table. We're going to have a unity between Muslims and Jews. We're going to have a unity between blacks and whites. We're going to have a wealth where everybody has got wealth and power and prosperity. He promised that not just to America, but to the world. And that's why people fell for him. But the opposite of that is to look at that and know that he can't deliver that. He cannot. So he's lying. Why would?
Well, he's delivered the opposite. He's delivered the opposite.
Absolutely. And that's my point. I knew that's exactly what he was going to do. So we have to recognize that anyone that would lie like that to the American people and to the world has to be ultimately evil, so that he can take away their liberties, take away their freedom, take away their economic base. So when you see Obama, when I saw him 6 years ago in that perspective, and talking the things he was, and saying the things he was saying, and denying what I knew to be the truth about him, it was very easy to see how evil he was, and how people were searching for it, looking for it. And you got to also realize that George Bush was such a disaster that they were looking for anything to bring them up out of the
But look at how now that I pull back, I see the elite behind this, but it's even more than they could orchestrate the way it was all orchestrated perfectly. It really is satanic. Everything we've seen has been orchestrated. As you know, the Bible talks about the mystery of evil, how it works so well together. And you can really now see on Obama a super evil design, one of the most evil I've ever even heard of in history, with a high-tech integration. And I shudder to think what we're going to see out of this figurehead, out of this production, out of everything behind him, out of all the evil behind him.
I wish you would send me the clip of what you just said. I'd love to play it on our broadcast every day, because it puts succinctly what we need to be aware of. Now that you've said that and you've demonstrated that truth, how do we educate the people? How do we get out there and tell the people who are still hoping against hope that Obama's going to change, that he's going to make the world a great place, even though they see themselves without jobs, they see themselves losing their employment, their income, they see themselves losing their family, losing their children, losing this nation, and yet they're still hoping that somehow or another that he is going to do what he promised 6 years ago. How do we educate people? That's a small clip you just said just a few moments ago.
Well, if you look at it, he's dangling again that it's coming, hope's around the corner, give me more power, I'll fix it. And then they consciously try to wreck the country. It's not like they're screwing things up on accident. They want to screw it up. You know they're doing it. I guess you just explained to people that you better follow your gut and your heart and your eyes. I mean, the thing is, it's all right there, and I think people are afraid of the responsibility. They want to, like you said earlier, think that the Republicans are going to save them, and they better figure out that praying to God is going to save them, because if people pray to God and repent and get on their knees and seek a reprieve of the nation, then God will change their heart and give them discernment and rise them up in little ways, but also in big ways, depending on who you are or where you're at. And together, just like evil works through Obama and his people, we have to ask God to use us as vessels against them in this battle. But God knows there's free will, so gives us free will. The devil manipulates against free will. We have to consciously and spiritually ask God to cleanse us and use us and sanctify us every day and put on the armor against the enemy.
There's an event in the Bible where there were two prophets, the prophet Elisha, and he had a young protege working with him. And they were surrounded by a mighty army that were outside of the canyon where they were at, and getting ready to come in to kill the prophet and the young man. And the prophet the young boy said, they're going to kill us, they're going to kill us. The prophet prayed that the young boy's eyes would be open so he could see the mighty host of angels that were standing there to protect him against that mighty army, and the angels are certainly going to win and overpower that army. What you have just said, and what we've got to do is that we have got to pray that God will open the eyes of the people so they can see how evil Obama is. And you made mention of the 2 Chronicles 7:14 that if we pray and repent, that God will heal our land. But beyond that, I am convinced, Alex, that if we launch a campaign of praying for people that God would open their eyes, when they see Obama, they will see unadulterated evil in its purest and most evil form. There's never been anybody in America in leadership as evil as this man is. And, of course, his beauty dazzles everybody, and so therefore they're not able to get to the core of who he is spiritually. People's eyes just need to be open to how evil this man is that has taken over our nation and is seeking to destroy. But I will say this, I know we're going to win. God has not established this
Yes, Pastor Manning?
to give it to Obama.
I just lost audio to the network. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Alex. Yeah. Pastor Manning is still on?
Yes, I'm still here.
Yes. Go ahead and finish up, Pastor Manning. You said that we are going to win, and I agree with you. I think so.
We are going to win. God is not going to give this nation over to Obama. And even though many people are asserting that, well, we've been so wicked, we've disavowed God, God's turned us over to a reprobate nation. But no, that's not the case at all. We are going through some struggles right now. But we will not lose this great nation. We will not lose this pinnacle of power and presentation of God on this planet. We will win.
Well, Pastor Manning, I think this is the most powerful interview I've ever done with you or heard, period. And I think definitely the Spirit of the Lord's with us today. Let's just agree together, and I'll have you back soon, that we should both, to our audiences, promote praying that the eyes of America and the world be open, and that we say that prayer. And I know I'll say that during the break, and I know you'll say it, Pastor Manning. Thank you. So, will you stay there and come back and say a prayer on air in the final segment?
Yes, I can do that. I will, sure.
Okay, and the show's over in 10 minutes, so we're going to come back. He'll say the prayer, and then I'll hit a few final news stories with David. Colonel who vowed to disarm Americans works with Homeland Security and threatens bloggers. I mean, these people are just roaring with their tyranny, and you look at photos of this colonel, he just looks like a power-crazed narcissist. Also, again, Army officer says, we will pry your guns from your cold, dead fingers. Unbelievable. I mean, just taunting us. Mandela Love Fest ignores dark side of legacy. We've got an article up there about things that, it's just a fact. They traded one evil for another. Homeland Security searches vehicles at ferry crossing checkpoint. We've got an article up on drudgereport.com on the right-hand side, red-linked, or it was red-linked earlier, where they're going to make you go through biometric scanners and like prison cells at the airport. It's all prisoner training. But Pastor Manning, I'm going to let you get out of here. I know you're a busy man. Atla.org, ATLAH, World Ministries. They're in Harlem. And God bless you for the work you do. But please just give us a brief or heartfelt prayer. It can be long or whatever, about opening the eyes. And I think everybody should say this prayer daily and really think about it and tell others about it, that the spell, the evil spell of deception be lifted from our eyes so that we can really, really see good from evil.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you again for having me on your broadcast today. I really, really appreciate it. But let's go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so very much for allowing us to be in this great nation, to be born here, to be officially born here, to have our birth certificate here, to know and to be a part of the process that has made this nation great. We recognize, Almighty God, that it is you that has blessed us against many other nations that we see around the world that don't have our joy, don't have our prosperity, don't have our love, and all the things that you've made such a pinnacle and such a city on a hill. Now, Heavenly Father, there's a great darkness and deception that has come over our nation in the person of Obama. And it is my prayer, and I unite with everyone else today, that an appeal to you to open the eyes of the people. Open their eyes, Lord, that they might see this awful evil that is now seated in Washington at the White House. And then open their hearts, Almighty God, and give them the courage to be able to stand up for truth and to stand up for the unborn and to stand up for those that have worked so make this great nation what it is, to stand up for those that are being maligned by and duped and pimped by Obama. Open their eyes and their ears and stuff their hearts full of courage that we might march forward. And we are praising you right now for the victory, for we know we will not lose, but we most assuredly will win in the day that you have set aside. And in your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen and amen.
Amen. Absolutely, and that's why that particular preacher that had his own prayer breakfast and mildly criticized Obama, they audited him and came after him, and it came out that it was ordered. And it just shows they're afraid of true men of God, true women of God who follow that. And folks, you know, this is not a preacher show, but in great times of evil, we have to just get down to the very bottom here. This is a spiritual battle. Pastor Manning, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Alex. God bless you, sir.
We'll talk to you again soon. There he goes. He was only going to be on for 20 minutes. He's very busy, but he was able to stay the whole hour with us. We'll get him back on because we got him on short notice. I tell you, folks, the evil is real. We're going to do a little bit of overdrive and finish some news, but then 40 seconds out to break, David Knight riding a shotgun. That was pretty powerful info.
It was very powerful. And, you know, when he's talking about how evil Obama is just what we were talking about yesterday, the way he's betraying these people who are at the bottom of the wage pyramid. And at the same time he's taking them down with Obamacare, he's also putting on, saying that he's for their minimum wage being waged.
Explain that.